Now we'll look at how to define and update items in your solution. You can find all this under the Update Items menu. Now the top part, all here in the gray, those are things that you can update without affecting anything historic. So for example, if I change the phone number in the website, I click into that and I can update my phone number on my website. And that only prints out on invoices and offer letters and things like that. So there's no worry about changing that. But let's say that I change a group. Now, these items do change what's currently in the system. So for example, notice that we have Bing here defined as a mother. So if I change this mothers group and I decide, oh, I'm not using that anymore, so I'll just write over it and I'll call it, massage clients or something. Problem is, now everybody that was part of the mothers group is now a massage client. So there are a couple of ways of handling some of these things, and that's why you get the warning. So let's go have a look back at the warning. So when we update anything in the red, we'll get this warning that says, basically, update the old items carefully because it's going to change historic things in the system. So if we want to have something disappear from a dropdown, let's say we're no longer using the referred by Ron. Ron's gone out of business and he is no longer sending us clients. I can choose yes, and that will archive that particular item. So now, when I go to this group, referred by Ron is no longer there. Everybody who has been referred by Ron will still appear. Notice Jim Jensen, who was referred by Ron, still comes up in our solution. And I still have that group because that group still exists. However, it doesn't appear anymore in the drop-down menu because we've decided we're not going to use it in the future. So if there's something that you're no longer using, often the best thing to do is simply choose to archive it so it doesn't appear in your drop-down list, and then create a new service. If, let's say, I wanted to change the Mothers group simply to the name, Mother's Day group or something like that, that's fine because when I go do my find here, and I look for the Mother's Day group, enter, I'll find everybody in the Mother's Day group, and because I'm just simply changing the name a little bit, it's not really affecting anything. So groups themselves are very powerful. You can define these sets of clients, whether it's mothers referred by a particular person, and then assign them with 2 clicks when you have that new client or even when they join a particular group. And it's a great way to set yourself up to doing these really cool finds that we'll look at later. So all the gray we can just update very quickly. So if I wanted to update my tax ID number, I move states or whatever, I could, again, put some more in that, and that would be just fine. And again, that would appear on billing reports, anything that needed your tax ID. I think Superbills have that as well. So the tax rates, for your state, it won't affect anything in the past if you change this, but if your sales tax went to 0.65 and you're actually selling materials that you want to charge sales tax on, you can do that here. And again, you can enter the offer letter text here. You can also change it when you're doing a mailing list. If I want to do an offer letter here, I can also click right in here. Chris is pulled from the name, so everybody gets their personalized letter. And then this I can change. I could change the signature. I could change the coupon. And we'll look at that later when we're looking at the offer letters. The default note, this is so that when I am entering in notes for somebody, if I have a particular format that I like, I can define that format. So let's say that I'm wanting to assign notes to Chris Moore for this adjustment. If I tap this little pencil, then it puts in that format. And so then if I want to type my notes within this, I can do that no problem. So it just provides a default format, and we can look at that a little more when we talk about entering services. These are things that we don't want to change because of those historic things. So if we look at billing codes now, you can see I have a service for Chris Moore. It's that same record, and she's had an adjustment, and it's been billing code 888XX, adjust the next spinal area. So if I were to change that, again, it would change what's going on in that previous record. So if I said, no, I'm no longer going to use 888X, instead I'm going to use 555XX. Okay, and that's actually not adjust the next spinal area, that's adjust the next 2 spinal areas or something like that. So when I do that, again, you look at the billing codes. If I now submitted this record to billing to the insurance company, it would have the wrong code. So again, I would be better to add a new code. Let's say I'm no longer going to use this one. I would choose to archive it. Now it won't appear in the drop-down menu. And then I would add a new one. And so now when I go back over here, I have that new code, and the old code's not appearing in the drop-down. So it's very important that we're careful in how we update. We'd see the same thing if we were updating services. So if I update services and products, we get the same warning. And again, this is an adult adjustment. If I again start changing this, adjustment adult to adjustment, say senior or something like that, notice that that automatically changes this and the description goes wrong. So I want to update very carefully. We'll leave that at adult, but I can change prices. So it is okay to change prices. So for example, if I wanted to change the price of an adult adjustment from $50 to $55, that will have no effect on this charge. So we're charging for an adult adjustment, and apparently she received a discounted rate a couple years ago at $45. I change this price to $55, and absolutely nothing happens over here, which is great. That's what we want. So still the service happened in 2015, still an adult adjustment, and she still got charged $45. Changing the full price of something only changes the automatic entry when you assign a new service. So if I gave Chris a new service and then I chose adult adjustment, it would automatically come in at $55. Again, I could change that, and that new number, the new $50, would stay. So the full price simply changes the automatic entry in the next charge that you make. Let's get out of this and then look at all the fun that we have over here on the services and products. So the service and product, if I were to add a new one, let's add a consultation, and we'll say that the full price for that is $70. And category is evaluation because it goes with that group. And then we get to these items over here. This says, do you want to charge sales tax for this? Definitely not, it's a service. Do you want to charge service tax for this? And for most of you, probably not. There are just a couple of places where there's service tax in a few states. So if your state has service tax, you hit yes. And then just to remind you, if we go back to update items, tax rates, I could go here and enter the service tax rate. And actually, if I chose yes for service tax, when we assign that service, tax will be applied to it. Count as a service. So this requires us to look at a business report. So let's quickly get a business report. All right, so what does this count as service mean? If you look at this report, you'll notice that there are packages of adjustments as well as adjustments. I don't want to count the sale of a package as a service. I only want to count the adjustments as a service. So if you notice, I have one adjustment here and 22 adjustments here, adding up to 23. I did sell 3 packages, but they're not adding into this adjustment number of 23. That's important because now when I look at dollars per service and I say, okay, in 2016, I gave 23 adjustments and I earned $1,595 for those adjustments. So if I do the math on that, that tells me that my average dollars per service, per adjustment, was $69.35. If we added 3 to that and had 26 because we were actually counting the sale of the package as an adjustment, then this number would be off. So when we choose over here whether or not we want to count it as a service, that's basically saying if you want this to be counted as a service in terms of that average dollars per service, great. If it's a package or something else, then choose no. And then there's archive. Archive, again, keeps it out of a drop-down list. So if I wanted to archive this particular item, then it would no longer appear with a new sale. So that's updating the services. Now let's have a quick look at doing a new service and how tax is applied for that. And we'll get into new services more in depth. But just to show you this consultation, which does have service tax applied right here, if we add that and we do consultation, then you'll notice that it automatically calculates the tax rate and it adds $2.10 to that charge. If I choose to change this and apply a discounted rate of $60, the tax will still calculate appropriately on that, and we're good to go. So just to show you a little bit how that works. So every item here in red, we want to be careful of how we update. Generally speaking, we'll add something new or change a price. We're not going to change a description. We can choose to archive items that we're no longer using. When we get down further, there's the billing codes, you've seen those. There's the expense types, and those are expense categories. So when you do your taxes, these are the breakdowns that you want. So let's just pull up an expense report here. These are the expense categories, and then they've been assigned to expenses that I've had across the year. So if I twirl down here, I see that all of these expenses were qualified as banking, my Square credit card processing. All of these things down here, they were qualified, assigned to the category as office supplies. And so this is where you can assign them. So there's a default set that ships with the solution, and it's this set, but you can always add and delete. If you've never used one of these, you can delete it. If your tax person says, oh, I want you to add a category for a different type of expense, you can add one. But this is the default set that comes with the solution. There's the groups, which we've had a look at. There's the payment types. Again, you get a default set, and this is the default set. So you could choose to add to that if you like, or take things away. Payors. We'll look at this a little bit more when we talk more about insurance, but this is where we would set up an insurance company that we can assign to multiple clients. Services and products we've had a look at. Service categories, let's have a quick look at. So for a chiropractic practice, we would have adjustments, evaluations, and things like that. There might be merchandise if you're selling t-shirts or supplements or things like that. So again, this is what provides our overall groupings on our business report. And you can see it's a one-to-one. There's adjustment, and then there's bodywork, there's classes, evaluation. So this defines the headings for our report and define whatever particular categories you want. It is important, though, when we look at this package, that you assign packages to the same category that the service is in. Because that way, the money received here, you notice $600 and $995 adds up to $1,595. We're then going to divide that by the 23 services that were adjustments. So if I put packages in a different category, then this number here, the average dollars per service, would not come out correctly, because we wouldn't have this $600 adding in as part of the money received for those 23 adjustments. So packages should always be assigned to the same category as whatever the service is. Finally, we have techniques. Techniques just make it quick to assign things that you did at a particular service or adjustment. So if I tap techniques, we get that same warning. So it allows me to quickly select techniques for the service. So if you do different things, maybe sometimes you do Atlas orthogonal and sometimes you do that with BGI, then you can just select and choose what you did. And this can be as broad or specific as you like. You could have 100 of these techniques, you could have 3, just depending on what works for you in your practice. So it just makes it super quick to say what you did at a particular service. And this set of techniques defines what comes up that you can assign over here. So that's updating items. The gray stuff, you can update easily. The red stuff, just be careful. Make sure that if you're updating something that's already in the system, that you're just changing a price or fixing a typo or the description in some small way. If it's something really new, archive the old one and add a new one.